Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. Now today we're going to be drawing some really cool watercolor looking oranges using Procreate. So grab your iPad and let's get started. Now this tutorial actually came to life when I was testing out a few different techniques to answer a question that I often get, and we're going to talk about that later because I need to show you something to really fully explain it. But if you've watched any of my watercolor videos before here on my channel, you're going to see that we're going to use a pretty different technique, and that's the reason why. The first step is going to be the exact same as usual though. We're going to want to make sure we have some sort of a watercolor or at least paper texture in our file to make sure the watercolor effect looks the best it can. So for that you have a few options. If you have watercolor brushes, whether they are mine or someone else's, usually those brushes would come with some sort of pre-textured file. So you could use that file no matter which creator it's from. If you don't have any pre-textured file though, don't worry, I included in the description below a link to my Procreate Jumpstart Kit, which includes a few paper textures as well as instructions on how to get them in your Procreate canvas so you have a texture to apply to your file. So whichever of those two options you decide to use, totally okay, as long as you have a paper texture, you're good to go. And from there, go ahead and pick whatever kind of orange you want to have for your oranges. Honestly, here you could draw something else. You could draw a lemon or a grapefruit, so whatever color you want those fruits to be, essentially. I'm going to be working with this orange right here, which you can see is pretty much in between yellow and red, which I know is exactly the definition of orange, between yellow and red, but it's not closer to red or it's not closer to yellow. It's really pretty much right in between. It's also very saturated and also quite bright. That being said, again, feel free to go ahead with a completely different color. If you want to use the exact same orange I am using, I'm going to go ahead and add the hex code right here in the video, which you can just take those numbers, go in the value section here at the bottom, and just add it here in the hexadecimal little section right here. Now from there, we're going to start by drawing the basic shape of the oranges, and for that we're going to use a very basic round brush. So no watercolor, no opacity just yet, just a basic round brush. So go ahead and open up your brush menu and scroll down to the, where is it? There we go, airbrushing panel, and find the hard brush. Now make sure the hard brush right now you have it set to fully 100% opacity, so this slider right here under the size. Make sure it is set to 100%. The size though, I mean, it really doesn't matter because we're just going to roughly color block. So whatever you're comfortable with, that's going to depend on your canvas size as well as just how many oranges you want to draw and how big they're going to be. So just experiment with that. And then we're going to make sure we have a layer so we have somewhere to draw. So go ahead and create a new layer below any texture you might have, whether it is a group or a single layer. Make sure it is below that and rename that new layer to oranges. And here you can draw however many oranges you want. I'm going to have 3, but feel free to have a completely different composition than I do. That's totally okay. And you're going to draw a rough circle for your orange. And then hold the pencil on the screen, which is going to smooth it really nicely and create an ellipse. I personally don't want to have a perfect circle, which would be adding a secondary finger and tapping, which as you can see kind of makes it even rounder. I feel like that's too round. I want something smooth, but not perfect either. So just holding the pencil to smooth the original line is what I'm personally going to do. And then from there, I'm just going to drop my color to fill in the shape. And then go ahead and do the exact same thing for the other oranges. Now once you have your circles, feel free to move them around as needed using the arrow tool. You can also resize them. Just make sure it is set to uniform, otherwise you're going to distort them. I feel like mine might be a little bit too big. I want to have space for leaves, so I'm just going to make them a little bit smaller. Then speaking of leaf, that's exactly the next thing we're going to tackle. So go ahead and create a new layer above your oranges, but still below the texture. And rename that new layer to leaves. Now for the leaves, we're going to obviously use green, and for that there's a bit of a hack that you can use to make sure you actually use a green that is going to work well with your orange. And I say hack, but it's really not that fancy. Essentially, just go ahead and open up the color menu here and select Harmony at the bottom. This is going to open up the color wheel here, and then you're going to see you have the label colors here at the top, and under that you're going to have something. In my case, it is split complementary. It might be completely different for you. But if you go ahead and tap on that, it's going to open up a menu with a bunch of different harmonies. So the idea here would just be scrolling through the list of the different harmonies until you find something that suggests a green. Now, I know from top of mind I'm going to have something in tetratic, so I'm just going to select that. And then if you go ahead and select that green, because it is based on the harmony based on the color wheel, you know it is going to work really well with your orange. That being said, right now it's very, very saturated and bright, which is going to look a little bit crazy. So we're going to go back to the classic section, and without shifting the hue, because again, we want to make sure it works really well with the orange, we can go ahead and play with both the saturation, so adding more gray or less gray, as well as the brightness, so making it darker or lighter. In my case, I'm going to decrease the saturation as well as decrease the brightness to get a green that is much darker and pretty much middle of the way in terms of saturation. Then with the same basic round hard brush, maybe a little bit smaller this time, we're going to go ahead and map out the leaves. And here you can really put the leaves wherever you want. You can have a completely different composition. I recommend though trying to have pretty thin, narrow leaves. That's going to look really, really good. And if you want to be a little bit more accurate as well, you may consider putting them on the opposite side of the stem. Meaning, for example, if you have a stem, sometimes you have leaves that are kind of alternating. In this case, they're going to be facing each other, so this kind of group of two. Otherwise, though, again, feel free to draw the leaves wherever you want. I recommend having some on top of the oranges and some kind of decorative ones behind. So I'm going to start by drawing a little bit of a stem poking out of this front orange. And then a nice thin pointy leaf on top of that stem. I may add two really thin pointy ones at the bottom. And I know I literally just talked about how, to be accurate, you would keep them in pairs on the stem. Since this leaf is really quite high on the stem, and there are two right here, which would really be conflicting if I was to add another one right here, I'm just going to tell myself in my head that the leaf that was in the pair with this one just kind of fell off because it's at the top and maybe it was hit when the orange was cut. So essentially here what I'm saying is composition is more important than making sure that your two leaves are facing each other at all time. If you feel like you need to have just one on the stem, that's okay. That being said, here on this orange that is on the left, I'm actually going to go ahead and draw two. So starting with a kind of crooked, bendy stem. And then two thin, pointy leaves on either side. So essentially in my mind, these are the only leaves that are attached to the oranges. So these are the only ones that should have the 2x2 pairing system. Now the next ones I'm going to start adding are actually just there for decoration and helping the composition. So they can be kind of whatever you want. Now I feel like I want to frame this bottom part here. So I'm going to add quite a lot of leaves. And I'm going to make it look like they're coming out from behind this orange. Let's go with just one roughly here. Maybe another one that is kind of overlapping this orange. Need to make sure my outlines are really nice. Here you go. And then another one, but kind of bendy, just so I have some variation in the leaves. Now to balance it up a little bit, I'm going to also add 2 leaves on this side. And maybe another one poking out in the back here. Now we're also going to add some little tiny stems on which flower buds are going to be. So I'm going to add just 1 small one here, and then 3 on this side. Just very basic, tiny curved lines, with maybe a little bit of a nub at the end, actually. Yeah, let's go with that. Now from there, if you have any kind of weird overlap between your leaves, or if you want to tweak the shape a little bit, feel free to go ahead and just set your eraser to the same hard brush. So again, in the airbrushing panel, the hard brush with the opacity at 100%, making it probably pretty small so you have a lot of control over it, and then just going over any weird overlaps or any shape that you're not super happy with. So at this stage, we really want to make sure we take the time to have a composition we're super happy with and basic shapes we're really, really happy with as well. Because if we're not happy with them, when we start adding the watercolor effect, it's only going to go downhill. So feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to tweak your leaves. Seriously, it's going to be worth it. And then we're almost going to be ready to start adding the watercolor effect, but before that, we're going to also map out the flowers. Okay, so once you're really happy with the oranges and the leaf shapes, we're going to do the same thing for the flower shape. So just go ahead and create a new layer above the leaves, but still below the textures, and rename that one to flowers. Now, orange blossoms are really pale. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back to our orange color that we use for the oranges. It should still be in the history. Otherwise, if you need to color pick it, make sure you go ahead and hide the texture layer you might have. Otherwise, it's going to kind of affect the colors, and then you can color pick. But since we're only using 2 colors, it should still be in your history. And from there, go ahead and make that orange really, really bright and desaturated. So you can see it's not quite white, and it's not quite gray, it's not quite just pale orange. It's just really high up in that top left corner, but not quite fully up there. Otherwise, same thing as for the leaves and the oranges, we're just going to start mapping out the different shapes for the flowers. And here we're going to draw flowers that have 5 petals each, as well as just some little blossoms that are going to be ovals. Feel free here again to draw however many flowers you want and drawing them wherever you want. You can completely customize the composition here. I would recommend having flowers that have pretty thin, narrow petals with fairly round ends as well. So kind of like this. So as you saw, I kind of drawing one in the intersection of the 3 oranges. I'm also going to draw one in this section here above the leaves. I think it's going to look really good. So just an oval, and then my 5 narrow petals. maybe another small one on this very edge. Might be hard to see in the video because it's going to be cream on white for now, but later when we add the details it's going to pop so much more, so just trust me for now. I'm going to keep it at 3 flowers. It's going to match well with the 3 oranges. And also usually, rule of thumb when you're drawing something, ideally keeping things in odd numbers. So 1, 3, 5, 7, you get the idea. Usually that's what looks better. So 3 oranges, 3 flowers, should be pretty good. And then I'm just going to add the little buds. So very simple. Again, it's probably quite hard to see, but these basic little ovals, or not even ovals, they're more like just blobs on top of the little stray stems that we have going on. So 1 on this side, on the left side, and then 3 on the right side, making sure that the 3 are not all the same size, otherwise it's going to look a little bit weird. Just like that. Now once more here, feel free to pause the video to take all the time you need to draw your flowers until you're super happy with the basic shapes. Then go ahead and move on to the next chapter and we're going to start adding the watercolor effect. At the start of the video, I was telling you about how this tutorial came to life because I was trying to answer a question I often get. And that question is, how can you use something like clipping masks or alpha lock with brushes that have lowered opacity, such as watercolor brushes? And the answer is, honestly, you can't really do that super easily because the way these masks, so clipping masks and alpha lock, work is that Procreate is going to essentially take all the transparent pixels in your image and block them, so you won't be able to draw on them. But when you're using brushes like watercolor brushes that have lowered opacity, Procreate just doesn't know if they're transparent or not, and so you're going to get a really splotchy effect if you try to use either clipping mask or alpha lock with brushes with lowered opacity. That being said, these modes are really super helpful, and I mean, you know it, I use them all the time in my regular illustration videos. And so I was trying to figure out a good workflow for using them with watercolor videos as well. And I think this technique is really cool, and I think I'm going to start doing more videos like this, but I'm going to show you it's really quite easy. So the first step is actually going to make all of these colors we have lighter. And then on top of that, we're going to start layering the different colors with the watercolor brushes or the brushes with lowered opacity to create the watercolor effect. And if you're feeling a little bit lost with all the words I'm throwing at you right now, don't worry, just follow along and you're going to see how it plays out and you're going to understand. So don't worry for now, but essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the layers we have, maybe except the flowers because they're already pretty pale, and we're going to make them really, really bright. So think of it as now these shapes, we want them to be the brightest color that is going to be on those elements. So the brightest part of my oranges is going to become the color I use for the oranges, and the brightest part of the leaves is going to become the color I use for these leaves. So for that, just go ahead, go back to the green you had in your history, make it quite a bit brighter, as you can see, something nice that would work well for highlights essentially. And then just drop that color over your leaves to recolor everything. Then we're going to do the same thing for the oranges, so just going back, color picking the orange from the history and making it super, super bright. And then going on the orange layer and just dropping that color. So right now it looks absolutely crazy, but bear with me, we're going to start adding the watercolor effect and the shadows onto the oranges first. And so for that, we're going to actually create a new layer, and we're going to be able to use a clipping mask because the orange shape we have at the back is not transparent. It's not using watercolor brushes, it is using solid color. So go ahead and create a new layer above your oranges. Rename that new layer to Orange Watercolor. And apply that as a clipping mask. So just tap on the layer to open the layer menu and select clipping mask right here. Now, if you're not super familiar with clipping mask, like I was telling you about earlier, what Procreate is going to do when you select a layer and activate it as a clipping mask, Procreate is going to take all of the pixels on the layer underneath and say, okay, these are actual pixels and these are transparent. And it's not going to allow you to draw on the transparent pixels. So long story short, what that does is now whatever we draw on this orange watercolor layer that has the clipping mask applied to the orange is going to stay within the shape of the orange. So we're going to be able to really quickly and very easily just brush our colors, and it's going to stay within the base shape that we worked on earlier. So that's what I was telling you. It's really important that those base shapes look great. And for that, we're going to go back to the orange we initially used, so it should still be in your history. In my case, it is right here. If it's not, honestly, just go back to any kind of light orange you use and then make it darker, more saturated. Doesn't need to be the exact same one as before. And here in terms of brushes, you have a couple different options. If you are working with free Procreate brushes, you're going to just stick to the hard brush you're using, but you're going to lower the opacity of that hard brush around 40% so that when you draw, you get those overlaps, which are going to be very helpful to create the watercolor effect. So that's option one. Option two would be any kind of brush pack you have that might have watercolor brushes in it. Now, if you're familiar with my videos, you probably know I have my big brush bundle, which includes a watercolor pack. So these are the brushes I'm going to use personally, but they're not essential at all. Throughout the rest of the video, I'm going to suggest both brushes from my big brush bundle as well as free brushes that come with Procreate. So you're going to be able to follow along no matter what. If you do want to check out my brushes though, they are linked in the description below, and there's always a special promo code for the YouTube people. And they may help you save time because they have a lot of randomness within them, which is super important for watercolor. If you don't have them though, again, don't worry. I'm going to give you tips on how to recreate that watercolor effect with just free tools that you have. It might just take a little bit longer. So once more, if you're using free brushes, just again, sticking to the hard brush with lowered opacity. But if you do have my big brush bundle, we're gonna go in the watercolor pack. I know that's surprising. And we're going to pick the basic watercolor brush. And here the goal is just going to be to start by sculpting the oranges. And so for that, we're going to start by just outlining the one that is in the front. Doesn't need to be perfect at all, but just so we have an idea of, okay, this one ends there. And then we're going to do the same thing, so defining the orange here that is not fully in the back, but kind of the middle, so just defining that shape. And from there, we're just going to go back in and layer the strokes until we have the level of orange that we want. And you can be as messy as you want here with your strokes. It's totally okay if you have a bunch of overlaps. It doesn't matter at all. Actually, that's probably better. It's going to help us with the watercolor effect. But what we want to make sure is we have a little section at the top at least without this darker orange so that we can have a bit of a highlight later. Now, actually mine might be a little bit too low, so I'm just going to come back in with my eraser real quick and just, yeah, erase that darker orange a little bit at the top. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the other oranges. So just layering the strokes until you have a basic orange that you like. And then we're essentially going to repeat this exact step with darker and darker and darker oranges every single time to add even more of that color variation and those shadows. And so just go back, open up your color menu, make your orange darker and more saturated. And you could also add a bit of red in it if you want. It doesn't need to stick with that same orange. So I'm just going to go ahead, add some red in mine a little bit. And then you're just going to go back in and overlap your strokes to help define the different oranges. So the one in the back is probably going to be the darkest. So you can start with this little area, making it super dark, overlapping your stroke a lot. Then separating these again. Adding a curvy shadow on the bottom as well. And then going back in with an even darker burnt orange red, kind of brown thing. So darker, more red, then reinforcing the dark shadows even more. So you can see every time I'm doing this, I'm also making my brush slightly smaller because I want to be more and more precise the more I get into the dark shadows, because usually those would be quite a bit smaller and more, yeah, precise. So really making that little section here super, super dark. And same thing with that little nook that is between these oranges and the leaves, making that super dark as well. And again, you can see my lines look absolutely crazy. Don't worry if yours do as well. We're going to blend everything once we're done mapping out the different shadows. So we're going to do the leaves and the flowers first, and then we're going to come back in and blending everything. So for now, just make sure you have the basic layout you want, and then yeah, we're gonna make it look good in the next chapter. Now to make them pop a lot from the background, you may want to go ahead and just kind of outline the edge as well with that dark color. It's very subtle, but you can see it really makes it pop. And especially the bottom edge that would be in contact with the ground, you want to make sure you have that bit of a contact shadow here. So. Now we're also going to add some shadows to help show that the leaves are actually part of the piece, because right now it looks like they're just floating and they're not affecting the oranges at all. So in my case, because I left the top right section of the oranges brighter, it probably means my light source would be somewhere around here. And so knowing that, what I can do is add cast shadows under the leaves. So again, my light source is here, meaning, for example, it would hit these leaves like this, and so these leaves would create a shadow that has the shape of these leaves on this orange, and that would kind of be curving alongside the orange. Now it doesn't need to be perfect at all, but adding it, you're going to see, is going to make a big difference. So just kind of drawing these two little stems, and then the thin pointy leaves that are kind of following the orange shape. And then just creating essentially the silhouette of the leaf with my shadow effect. Same thing here, this thin pointy leaf, kind of like that. Great. So I'm just going to repeat that with the other leaves as well as the flower. So these leaves, this one would be casting a shadow on this orange. Well, I would have the stem and then the leaf. These right here, kind of like that. And then this flower, in my mind, is really quite close to the orange, so it's not going to be casting too big of a shadow. And this one, in theory, if you just think of the light coming from this angle, would not be really casting any shadow on the orange. But if you think of the light coming from slightly the front as well, so yes, the top right, but slightly in front, you could think that this flower would be casting a bit of a shadow, very thin, just kind of like this. Great, so now that we have our more intense, vibrant colors with shadows for the oranges, we're going to do the exact same thing for the leaves and then the flowers. So just go ahead and create a new layer above the leaves. Apply it as a clipping mask as well, so that now whatever we draw on this new layer stays within the leaf shape that we have. And rename that new layer to Leaves Watercolor. Same thing here, we're going to go back to the original green that we used for the leaf. In my case, I'm really lucky I still have it in my history. Otherwise, if you have any kind of pale green, just go ahead and select that and then make it darker. But I'm going to go ahead and pick mine right here. And then still with the basic watercolor brush or the hard brush with lowered opacity, we're going to do the exact same thing. So we're just going to start layering the strokes to add a bit of watercolor effect as well as shadows. Now for the leaves, what I personally like to do is essentially start by drawing the two different halves separately, so drawing the two sections, leaving a gap in the middle, and then just reinforcing some areas within those two sections, but still leaving the middle line pale green. Now, one thing you may do to really help that watercolor effect is layer the strokes a lot on the edges of the shapes to make sure the edges are a little bit darker. That's going to help, again, just with the watercolorness of everything. So there's really no right or wrong way to do this here. Feel free to pause the video, take all the time you need to add the shadows on your leaves. I'm going to keep my video going in the background so you can use it as a reference, but I'm going to speed it up a little bit. And once we're done with that, we're going to meet up in the next step, which is going to be adding our shadows and effects onto the flowers. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and leave me a comment with how many oranges you're drawing in your illustration. And I know it might seem a little bit silly, but believe it or not, it's super simple, but a secret password does give me a lot of insight into how to edit and pace my videos better, and that helps me create better tutorials for you. So again, if you watch this far, just go ahead and leave me a comment below with how many oranges are in your illustration, and then we're going to keep going. So once you have your leaves, again, we're going to do the exact same thing with the flowers, but it's going to be quite a bit easier. The flowers are pretty simple. So just go ahead and create a new layer above the flowers. Rename that new layer to Flowers Watercolor. Whatever that was. And apply it as a clipping mask so that whatever we draw now stays within the flower shape. It's not working. There we go. Same thing, we're going to go back to whatever kind of cream color we use for the flowers. I think in my case it was this one right here, otherwise you can color pick it. And we're going to make it a little bit darker. So nothing super dark, but definitely a little bit darker. It's more like a tan. Well, no, that's still very cream, but you get the idea. And then same brush, what we're going to do is we're mostly going to focus, actually I could make it a little bit darker. There we go. So yeah, we're mostly going to focus that darker color on the bottom of each petal and kind of bringing it upwards a little bit, creating those nice little strokes. And for the petals, it's kind of the opposite of the oranges and the leaves. We want to make sure the edges remain brighter than the middle. So instead of going with the darkest color being on the edge, the darkest color is in the middle, and the edges are going to remain pretty much just the basic cream that we had before. And don't forget to add a bit of shadows on the buds as well. So probably just doing kind of the left side, this crescent moon shape on each bud. It's pretty much all you have to do, honestly. So now that we have the shadows painted and everything mapped out essentially, we just need to go back in and blend the colors in because right now it looks absolutely crazy. And for that, we're going to start with the orange watercolor layer. And here to blend, you're going to have a couple different options depending whether you're working with free brushes or my watercolor pack. So if you're working with free options, you're going to set the smudge tool right here at the top. You're going to pick that, and you're going to set it to the soft brush from the airbrushing pack. So that's a free pack that comes with Procreate. So just soft brush airbrushing as your smudge tool. If you do have my watercolor brushes though, go ahead and set your paintbrush, so not the smudge tool, really the paintbrush, to, well, in the watercolor pack, at the very bottom, the water blender. Then with that, whether it is the watercolor blender or the smudge tool, just go over and blend in any weird thing that you're not super happy with. Make sure that you don't overblend though, otherwise it's going to look really digital. You want everything to remain kind of organic, just like watercolor pigments would flow together in real life. One tip, if you are using the smudge tool, so if you're working with free brushes, I'm just going to give you an example. If you go over a line, you're going to see it's going to smooth everything really evenly, which is definitely not the vibe we want. So you're going to need to add that randomness manually by drawing kind of squiggles. So just kind of moving your arm around weirdly instead of doing one fell swoop. If you are working with my water blender though, that randomness is already within the brush, so you can just go over your line and it's going to blend it a little bit all over the place. And some places it's going to blend it more, some places it's going to blend it less. So you really don't have to worry about that. One thing to be really careful with though is make sure that no matter which tool you're using, you're not blending in the cast shadows that we have from the leaves and the flowers. You can blend inside the shadows, but not these edges. These edges, we want them to stay super nice and crisp. Another advice I would have for you here is blend less than you think. So go ahead and really just do what you feel is essential to be blended, like what looks absolutely terrible, but leave that organicness. That's not really a word, but it's going to be a word for today. Leave that organic look to your piece. Make sure you do not overblend, otherwise it is not going to look like watercolor no matter what you do. Great, so again, you can see still pretty rough, but definitely way less digital looking. We're going to do the exact same thing on the leaves watercolor layer. Again, either the smudge tool or the water blender, but since the leaves are quite a bit smaller, you're gonna go with a smaller version of your brush. And again, same thing, don't overblend, blend as little as you can. Whenever it just looks absolutely crazy like this, looks very digital, just going over it to make it look more organic and more flowy, but otherwise things like this look really good, so I'm just going to keep them as is. So you can see I'm literally spending, what, 2-3 seconds per leaf? Not more than that. It's really just one little swoop and that's it. Now the flowers, we're actually going to leave them as they are, unless you have something absolutely crazy, because we do want to have a bit more precision within the flowers, because they're more delicate. I don't know. I don't really have an explanation of what, but just trust me, that's what we're going to do. So if you feel like you absolutely need to blend your flowers, go ahead and blend them, but otherwise we're going to start adding the details. Now the details here are going to be very simple. We're just going to create one layer and draw all the details on that one layer. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything you have except the texture, so below the texture but above anything that we just drew, and rename that new layer to details. And here we're essentially going to draw a few white dots and a few dark brown dots just to make the piece feel a little bit more precise. Starting with white, so go ahead and just pick straight up pure white, as well as any kind of pencil brush you like. So that could mean if you're working with free Procreate brushes in the sketching pack that comes with the app, the 6B pencil. And if you're wondering why mine is really big, just go ahead and look at my winter landscape tutorial and you're going to understand why. It's still the exact same brush, but I just tweaked some setting. You can still pick the 6B pencil and just play with the size until you have something you're happy with. Don't worry about mine looking crazy big, that's okay. So that's one option again, if you're working with free brushes, 6B pencil from the sketching pack. If you are working with my watercolor brushes though, go ahead and pick the coloring pencil that comes with that pack. And what we're going to do is we're going to refine these middle lines in the leaves first. So just drawing a bright white line in the middle. Doesn't need to be perfect, it's kind of nice actually if it's overlapping and a little bit floppy. So just going ahead and doing that over all of the different leaves you have. You can also add some highlights on stems and stuff like that if you want. That's really totally up to you at this stage, honestly. But at least one white line in the middle of the leaves. And you can also add some little diagonal veins on the leaves to really make them pop. So what I personally usually do is I focus them on one side of the leaf only, and I only go in groups of either 3 or 5 diagonal lines per leaves. So kind of like that. Maybe this one has 5. This one, they can be on the other side of the leaf. So you see, it's really simple, but it brings a lot of rhythm to the piece, which I think this piece is really needing right now. I think the colors look good and the composition is fun, but it's a little bit bland. So super simple, takes just a few seconds, but it makes a big difference. In the same vein, we're going to add some very small dots on the oranges, focusing on the section that is in the light. So various size between the different dots and not overdoing it. You can see, I don't know, that's what, 15, 20 dots per orange. That was way too many on this one in the back. The orange in the back, keep it pretty simple because it is so dark. These white dots kind of pop off a little bit too much. So I'm just going to gently erase over them. But honestly, you could probably skip them altogether if you want. Now we're also going to add some little highlights on these flowers. So just going back to the brush, if you erase your little dots, and then any kind of little line you want to add on these flowers, you can add. So maybe some little lines like this within the petals, maybe some on the sides. That's really totally up to you. But we just want to make them a little bit less flat than they are right now. And you can see here, I'm being very, very, very loose. We don't want to be too precise. Again, here we're drawing something that should mimic watercolor. And so we want to have some of that really flowy, organic look. And last but not least, we're also going to add some darker details, mostly focusing on the flowers. So just go back to any dark kind of beige you had and you use for the flowers and make it even darker. So you're probably going to have something middle of the way in terms of brightness, really quite desaturated, and still with that kind of orange that we use for the oranges. And then just go ahead and, like we did for the oranges with the white dots, go ahead and draw some dark gray dots in the middle of the flowers. You can also draw some little lines on the buds as well. Kind of all over the place right now, but I don't know, I get so excited drawing details. It really brings the piece together. It takes just a few seconds, but it makes such a big difference. So usually when I'm drawing by myself and it's not a video that I'm filming, when I'm drawing details, I'm doing one thing and then the other thing, and it's really hard when I'm filming my tutorials to not get too excited and get all over the place. So I apologize for that. But yeah, little dots in the middle of the flowers and then little lines on the buds. You can also just use that dark brown to add a few lines on the flowers, the petals themselves if you want. I probably would advise against it because they're going to look really, really strong and not super good. But if you want to, you could at least reinforce just between the petals, because I feel like right now the flowers might be a little bit too flat. So just these dark lines, focusing them, again, yes, between the different petals without adding too many within the petal itself. Yeah, I think that really helps. It's very subtle, but compared to this flower, we can tell this one is a little bit just more structured. And I know I said last but not least, but there's one last little tiny step that you can do, especially if you have my watercolor brushes, and that is adding some splatters over the piece to make it look just a little bit more fun. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything you have, except for the texture, of course, and rename that new layer to Splatters. Now we want these splatters to blend with the colors below. So we're going to use a blending mode. So just go ahead and tap on the little N next to the check mark here, and we're going to use the blending mode linear burn, which is just 2 blending modes above the normal. And then go back to whatever orange you use for the oranges. It really doesn't need to be exactly the same one. As a matter of fact, I might go with one of the darker ones, so one I use for the shadows. As long as you have something orange, honestly, it's totally okay. And here in terms of brushes, if you're working with free options, there's really not a great option. I'm sorry about that. But the closest one would probably be in the spray painting pack that comes with Procreate, the Giclée brush. It does look like splatters, but it's super, super, super dense. So you have to make sure you use it very, very sparingly. And you might also consider just going back in with your eraser and then erasing some of the splatters. That's option 1. You could also just go in with the hard brush and manually draw every splatter, making sure you have different sizes. That's an option. If you do have my watercolor brushes though, with my big brush bundle, you could pick just a splatter brush that comes with the pack and then just very quickly add some splatters, mostly focusing on the sides of the oranges, I would say. And once you're done roughly painting them, feel free to go back and play with the opacity of your layer. I feel like mine might be a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to lower the opacity, probably around, I don't know, 70, 75%. Yeah, something like that. Now, if you enjoyed this video and want more watercolor tutorials, I highly recommend you check out this playlist because I have a whole lot more for you. But before you leave, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly videos I post every Tuesday and Saturday. Then click on the link right here, and I'll meet you there.